Good evening, and thank you for coming out this evening. Can everyone hear me? Great. I want to thank Jessica for having me, and I want to thank everybody Jessica thanked. Sonnet and Rachel and everyone, so thank you so much. And it's so nice to look out and see Bob and Alona and everyone from the English department, David and Lawrence, and it's a moment for me. So I was telling somebody that Anita Sokoski and Karen Swan are my columns when I was here. They kept me standing, so I want to thank them, since I might not have another chance standing here in front of you anytime next week. Maybe it's sometime later. Citizen, I started working on it a few years ago, and in that time, it became a community document in a sense. I asked many friends to tell me about moments when they felt racism reared its whatever metaphor you want, and in a moment that was an intimate moment, a moment when you didn't expect it. I wasn't as interested in sort of supremacist moments, but subtle moments, those micro moments. And so I'll start out by reading a few of those stories. Oh, I also want to thank Beth, who co-edited the series for the Racial Imaginary and has been, in these last few years, the person that I have spoken to constantly about this and that around the subject. So thank you, Beth. You're in the dark, in the car, watching the black tarred street being swallowed by speed. He tells you his dean is making him hire a person of color, when there are so many great writers out there. You think maybe this is an experiment and you are being tested or retroactively insulted, or you have done something that communicates this is an okay conversation to be having. Why do you feel comfortable saying this to me? You wish the light would turn red or a police siren would go off so you could slam on the brakes, slam into the car ahead of you, fly forward so quickly both your faces would suddenly be exposed to the wind. As usual, you drive straight through the moment with the expected backing off of what was previously said. It is not only that confrontation is headache-producing, it is also that you have a destination that doesn't include acting like this moment isn't inhabitable, hasn't happened before, and the before isn't part of the now, as the night darkens and the time shortens between where we are and where we are going. I don't know if you all have read Lauren Ballon's Cruel Optimism, but it's a book I recommend partly because it's important to me. It does this thing where it talks about the ways in which trauma, it's a mistake to think of trauma as a true break, but instead as something that happens and accumulates in small ways over time. And that was, in thinking about this book and thinking formally about how to put it together, it seemed to me that to think about these kinds of infractions, that it was important to come up with a form that allowed the moments to accumulate. So I'm just going to continue to read a few of them to see if I can replicate that. Because of your elite status from a year's worth of travel, you have already settled into your window seat on United Airlines when the girl and her mother arrive at your row. The girl looking over at you tells her mother, "These are our seats, but this is not what I expected." The mother's response is barely audible. "I see," she says. I'll sit in the middle. A woman you do not know wants to join you for lunch. You're visiting her campus. In the cafe, you both order the Caesar salad. This overlap is not the beginning of anything because she immediately points out that she, her father, her grandfather, and you all attended the same college, this college. She wanted her son to go there as well, but because of affirmative action or minority something, she is not sure what they're calling it these days, and weren't they supposed to get rid of it? Her son wasn't accepted. You're not sure if you are meant to apologize for this failure of your alma mater's legacy program. Instead, you ask where he ended up. The prestigious school she mentions doesn't seem to assuage her irritation. This exchange, in effect, ends your lunch. The salads arrive. When the stranger asks, "Why do you care?" you just stand there staring at him. He has just referred to the boisterous teenagers in Starbucks as niggers. "Hey, I'm standing right here," you responded, not necessarily expecting him to turn to you. He's holding the lidded paper cup in one hand and a small paper bag in the other. They're just being kids. Come on, no need to get all KKK on them, you say. "Now there you go," he responds. The people around you have turned away from their screens. The teenagers are on pause. "There I go?" you ask, feeling irritation begin to rain down. Yes, and something about hearing yourself repeating the stranger's accusation in a voice usually reserved for your partner makes you smile. You and your partner go to see the film The House We Live In. You ask a friend to pick up your child from school. On your way home, your phone rings. Your neighbor tells you he is standing at his window watching a menacing black man casing both your homes. The guy is walking back and forth, talking to himself, and seems disturbed. You tell your neighbor that your friend, whom he has met, is babysitting. He says, "No, it's not him. He's met your friend, and this isn't that nice young man. Anyway, he wants you to know he's called the police." Your partner calls your friend and asks him if there's a guy walking back and forth in front of your house. Your friend says that if anyone were outside, he would see him because he is standing outside. You hear the sirens through the speakerphone. Your friend is speaking to your neighbor when you arrive home. The 4 police cars are gone. Your neighbor has apologized to your friend and now is apologizing to you. Feeling somewhat responsible for the actions of your neighbor, you clumsily tell your friend that the next time he wants to talk on the phone, he should just go in the backyard. He looks at you a long minute before saying he can speak on the phone wherever he wants. "Yes, of course," you say. "Yes, of course." That was Stan, my neighbor. Stan the man. I live in Claremont, California, and there's a mountain range, and every morning I walk my dog, Sammy, up the mountain to the gazebo. It's about 2.5 miles, and then we walk down. There's a group of women, and we randomly show up at each other's house saying, "Are you walking this morning?" And so one morning I was walking with a friend, and I said to her, "I'm working on this book about microaggressions. She's a white woman. I said, "Do you have moments where you feel your whiteness is sort of controlling your behavior? And that you feel somehow that because you're a white woman, you have to or not do, you do certain things or you don't do certain things." And so she said, yeah. At first she said, no, I can't really think of anything. And we got all the way up And she was still sort of saying, maybe this, and then she's like, no, 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 no. And then we started walking down, and she said, well, you know, there is one moment where I often think and feel like a white woman. And she told me the moment, and then I thought, wait, I have that moment too, so does that mean I am thinking and feeling like a white woman? So I don't know, but I will read this to you. On the train, the woman standing makes you understand there are no seats available. And in fact, there is one. Is the woman getting off at the next stop? No. She would rather stand all the way to Union Station. The space next to the man is a pause in a conversation you are suddenly rushing to fill. You step quickly over the woman's fear, a fear she shares. You let her have it. The man doesn't acknowledge you as you sit down because the man knows more about the unoccupied seat than you do. For him, you imagine it is more like breath than wonder. He has had to think about it so much you wouldn't call it thought. When another passenger leaves his seat and the standing woman sits, you glance over at the man. He is gazing out the window into what looks like darkness. You sit next to the man on the train, bus, in the plane, waiting room, anywhere. He could be forsaken. You put your body there in proximity to, adjacent to, alongside. You don't speak unless you are spoken to, and your body speaks to the space you fill, and you keep trying to fill it, except the space belongs to the body of the man next to you, not to you. Where he goes, the space follows him. If the man left the seat before Union Station, you would simply be a person in a seat on the train. You would cease to struggle against the unoccupied seat. When, where, why, the space won't lose its meaning. You imagine if the man spoke to you, he would say, it's okay, I'm okay, you don't need to sit here. You don't need to sit, and you look past him into the darkness. The train is moving through a tunnel. All the while, the darkness allows you to look at him. Does he feel you looking at him? You suspect so. What does suspicion mean? What does suspicion do? The soft gray-green of your cotton coat touches the sleeve of him. You are so shoulder to shoulder, though standing, you could feel shadowed. You sit to repair whom? Who? You erase that thought. And it might be too late for that. It might forever be too late or too early. The train moves too fast for your eyes to adjust to anything beyond the man, the window, the tile tunnel, its slick darkness. Occasionally, a white light flickers by like a displaced sound. From across the aisle, tracks, room, harbor, world, a woman asks her man in the rows ahead if he would mind switching seats. She wishes to sit with her daughter or son. You hear, but you don't hear. You can't see. It's then the man next to you turns to you. And as if from inside your own head, you agree that if anyone asks you to move, you'll tell them, we're traveling as a family. I have a friend who is a lawyer. He grew up actually across the street from Paul Newman in Hollywood, or in Beverly Hills. And I asked him the question that I've been asking everyone, can you tell me moments that pull you out of yourself? And his wife is, he's Jamaican, black. His wife is from the Midwest, white. And so we were at dinner, and he tells me the story that I'm about to read, and he had never told her. And so it was an interesting moment. I knew whatever was in front of me was happening, and then the police vehicle came to a screeching halt in front of me, like they were setting up a blockade. Everywhere were flashes, a siren sounding, and a stretched out roar. Get on the ground now. Then I just knew. And you're not the guy, and still you fit the description, because there is only one guy who is always the guy fitting the description. I left my client's house knowing I would be pulled over. I just knew. I opened my briefcase on the passenger seat just so they could see. Yes, officer rolled around on my tongue, which grew out of a bell that could never ring because its emergency was a tolling I was meant to swallow. In a landscape drawn from an ocean bed, you can't drive yourself sane. So angry you are crying. You can't drive yourself sane. The motion wears a guy out. Our motion is wearing you out. And still, you're not the guy. Then flashes, a siren, a stretched out roar. And you're not the guy, and still you fit the description, because there is only one guy who is always the guy fitting the description. Get on the ground. Get on the ground now. I must have been speeding. No, you weren't speeding. I wasn't speeding. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why are you pulling me over? Why am I pulled over? Put your hands where they can be seen. Put your hands in the air. Put your hands up. Then you are stretched out on the hood, then cuffed. Get on the ground now. Each time it begins in the same way, it doesn't begin the same way. Each time it begins, it's the same. Flashes, a siren, the stretched out roar. Maybe because home was a hood the officer could not afford, not that a reason was needed. I was pulled out of my vehicle a block from my door, handcuffed and pushed into the police vehicle's back seat, the officer's knee pressing into my collarbone, the officer's warm breath vacating a face creased into the smile of its own private joke. Each time it begins in the same way, it doesn't begin the same way. Each time it begins, it's the same. Go ahead and hit me, motherfucker, fled my lips, and the officer did not need to hit me. The officer did not need anything from me except the look on my face on the drive across town. You can't drive yourself sane. You're not insane. Our motion is wearing you out. You're not the guy. This is what it looks like. You know this is wrong. This is not what it looks like. You need to be quiet. This is wrong. You need to close your mouth now. This is what it looks like. Why are you talking if you haven't done anything wrong? And you're not the guy, and still you fit the description, because there's only one guy who is always the guy fitting the description. In a landscape drawn from an ocean bed, you can't drive yourself sane. So angry, you can't drive yourself sane. The charge the officer decided on was exhibition of speed. I was told after the fingerprinting to stand naked. I stood naked. It was only then I was instructed to dress, to leave, to walk all those miles back home. And still you're not the guy, and still you fit the description, because there is only one guy who is always the guy fitting the description. I asked him why they made him take off his clothes, but he didn't know. My brothers are notorious. They have not been to prison. They have been imprisoned. The prison is not a place you enter. It is no place. My brothers are notorious. They do regular things like wait. On my birthday, they say my name. They will never forget that we are named. What is that memory? The days of our childhood together were steep steps into a collapsing mind. It looked like we rescued ourselves, were rescued. Then there are these days, each day of our adult lives. They will never forget our way through, these brothers, each brother, my dear brother, my dearest brother's dear heart. Your hearts are broken. This is not a secret, though there are secrets, and as yet I do not understand how my own sorrow has turned into my brothers' hearts. The hearts of my brothers are broken. If I knew another way to be, I would call up a brother. I would hear myself saying, my brother, my dearest brother's dear heart. On the tip of a tongue, one note following another is another path, another dawn where the pink sky is the bloodshot of struck, of sleepless, of sorry, of senseless shush. Those years of and before me and my brothers, the years of passage, plantation, migration, of Jim Crow segregation, of poverty, inner cities, profiling, of 1 in 3, 2 jobs, boy, hey boy, each a felony, accumulate into the hours inside our lives where we are all caught hanging, the rope inside us, a tree inside us, its roots, our limbs, a throat sliced through, and when we open our mouth to speak, blossoms, oh blossoms, no place coming out, brother, dear brother, that kind of blue. The sky is the silence of brothers all the days leading up to my call. If I called, I'd say goodbye before I broke the goodbye. I say goodbye before anyone can hang up. Don't hang up. My brother hangs up, though he's there. I keep talking, the talk keeps him there. The sky is blue, kind of blue. The day is hot. Is it cold? Are you cold? It does get cool. Is it cool? Are you cool? My brother is completed by sky. The sky is his silence. Eventually he says, it is raining down. It was raining, it stopped raining. It is raining down. He won't hang up. He's there, but he's hung up, though he's there. Goodbye, I say, I break the goodbye, I say goodbye before anyone can hang up. Don't hang up. Wait with me, though the waiting may be the call of goodbyes. I was thinking if I wrote another book tomorrow, it would be called Waiting, partly because I feel like that's sort of what Black and brown bodies are doing. And right now, in Ferguson, I feel as if I have been waiting for something I don't expect to happen, if that makes sense. So one is waiting for the indictment one doesn't expect to come. And so I'm sort of interested in how you can both hold the anticipation and negate it in the same body constantly, always and again, always and again. I'm going to end with, I never know what to read last, because I feel as if this book is in the middle of things. A friend writes of the numbing effects of humming, and it returns you to your own sigh. It's no longer audible, you've grown into it. Some call it aging, an internalized liquid smoke blurring ordinary ache. Just this morning, another, what did he say? Come on, get back in the car. Your partner wants to face off with a mouth, and who knows what handheld objects the other vehicle carries. Trayvon Martin's name sounds from the car radio a dozen times each half hour. You pull your love back into the seat because though no one seems to be chasing you, the justice system has other plans. Yes, and this is how you are a citizen. Come on, let it go, move on. Despite the air conditioning, you pull the button back and the window slides down into its door sleeve. A breeze touches your cheek, as something should. Thank you so much for listening. Ferguson for me was interesting because I didn't go there intentionally. I was invited by the Pulitzer Foundation a year ago to show some videos in their museum. And so I happened to go out a few days after Ferguson happened, after Brown was murdered. Let's call it what it is. And when I went there, I went to the street that had his memorial. So this is anecdotal answer, not indirect. And on the street, they had food because they said that people felt uncomfortable coming out of their house with all the media and the police cars lining the street. There were police cars up and down the street, but the police were inside the cars. And so as you were walking back and forth, you would just see these faces looking out at you. And they had, the churches had, I guess, and different people had brought food, and it was on the lawn. And these two black men came up to me, and they said, we heard they were giving away food. And I said, yeah, I think it's over there. And one of them walked off, but the other one stood next to me because I was standing next to the memorial. And he looked at a picture of Michael Brown, and he said, he looks just like me. And I don't say anything because it's not clear he's speaking to me. But then he says it again. He says, he looks just like me. And I sort of start looking at the picture. And so I'm like, does he look like you? And in fact, he does look like him. And then he said, it's as if he could be me. And at that point, it became very uncomfortable because I felt that he was identifying with a dead body. And I didn't want to be party to his projection. So I said to him, the food's over there, just to move him. But then the immediacy of what happened in Ferguson, I think, became real in my body in a way that it was just an idea before. Because that kid could be the next Michael Brown. And so whereas this book inhabited a life that I've lived and a lot of black people, I think, have lived, there was suddenly this sense of this low-intensity war that's going on, and that's their term, that's the police's term. It's called a low-intensity war, and that's why they have all that military stuff, because they feel like that's what they're doing. And they're doing it based on perceived threat, the perceived threat, the imagined threat. And so that's why I feel like suddenly I feel that I'm waiting for something as a corrective that feels immediate. And this indictment, lack of indictment situation, I think will have ramifications, I hope, in a different way than, say, in the past. Because for the first time, I don't think that I need to do all the work. I mean, you turn on the media and they are saying what I am thinking. So now I feel like I can embody the waiting in a different way, if that makes sense. One of the things that Beth and I have been talking a lot about as we edited The Racial Imaginary is the way in which whiteness, the idea that whiteness is itself constructed, is a silent idea. And so white people don't have to think about how it is their privilege and passage through life works. And so I think just even by writing in the journal, it's the beginning of throwing it up. And it's the fact that one doesn't think about it, that you don't think about it perhaps, is part of what privilege is. And so I thank you for taking that moment. I think the Rodney King incident was devastating, not because Rodney King was beaten. That's ordinary. That happens. We know about the police. We know especially about the LAPD. But because it was videotaped and a jury of citizens said, we don't care what we see. Instead, we're going to honor what we feel. And that was a break. That was a kind of, it was incredulous because even though you don't trust individuals, you sort of want to trust the justice system, right? And so I think that moment was a huge moment, and it drove a lot of people to create art too. There's actually a picture in here by Nick Cave. He makes these sound suits. I don't know if you know his work. It's one of those things, now that I'm looking, I'll never find it. Oh, I think it's in the Serena Williams. 33? You're right, thank you. It's this image. And when I first saw Nick Cave's, he makes, their suits and people actually put them on and they walk around in them. And I thought, that's interesting, this sort of surrealist mode. But then I read an interview in which he talked about how after the beating of Rodney King, he wanted to create something for the body that shifted the way black men were viewed. Not in real time, but in a sense of a kind of imaginative, surrealist leap, because that's what it would take to break the already read text of the black male body. So that for me was important to include Nick Cave's image, because I feel like much of this book is really Rodney King to now. And that we've been, one of the things that's interesting about surveillance is that suddenly we can turn it back on those who were monitoring us. And my daughter, I was brushing my teeth the other day, and she came in the bathroom to brush her teeth. And she said, Mom, maybe the police should have body cams because people can make stuff up. And so it would help them too. So maybe they should get, and I, secretly I was like, do you think Michael Brown should, I was like, what are you saying to me? Like, what are you telling me? But that sense of the trajectory from then to now has something to do with our accountability now. And the ways in which, and I think this is a long answer to your question, the ways in which I think the art response will be different now is that there is a way in which things are being documented. Because we all have phones with cameras, and anything could have been said about Michael Brown's shooting. But we have recordings, we have pictures of the body lying on the street for 4 hours. We have documentation. So I think that might also speak to how artists will do. I myself am collecting, my husband and I are working with a video, and we are buying from, it costs a lot of money, but we're buying the footage of the police and all the military stuff that came out in the first days. And Beth and I are also culling all of the police statements in which black men are being shot, for basically no reason. And then the police say, this is what always happens, the police say, well, I felt threatened. The fact that he is unarmed is irrelevant. What's really happening is that I felt threatened. It doesn't matter what's going on with him. I don't know, did you see that one where they ask, where he has the guy come out of his car and he says, give me your license? And the guy reaches in the car to get his license and he starts shooting him. And the guy says to him, but you said get my license. Why did you shoot me? And he says, well, I thought you were going to, shoot me. But you said, get my license. The recording is really interesting. You can listen to it online. Because you kind of feel bad a little bit for the policeman. I mean, because he clearly is driven by something other than reality. And, he doesn't sound like a bad guy. But somehow, his his imagination is controlling his behavior beyond the reality of the moment. So I'm interested in working with that video as well. One of the things I didn't want with this book is for people to read it and then say, I'm really sorry, Claudia, this happened to you. And localize it into this one body. And so the act of seeking other voices was partly an act of turning the book into a community experience, because that's what it is. But to answer more directly your question, I just called up people. It's like, hey, I'm working on this thing. You got a story for me? No? Call me back if you remember anything. And then initially people told me stories that I wasn't interested in. Things like, oh, someone touched my hair, somebody called me by the same name as somebody else, things like that. Those are the stories we've heard again and again and again. But I said, no, I want those moments that shocked you, even as you have lived 50 years, moments that just still manage to shock you. And then, like a week or two later, someone would call me back. And they would say, I couldn't think of anything, but then I was out running and I remembered, and then they would go. And oddly, I would never write the stories down initially, because I was interested in the ones that I remembered. So I would sort of carry them around a little bit, and then, and I think everybody thinks that the you in the speaker is always a black person and the aggressor is always white. But there are situations that were told to me, I'm saying this because Beth is sitting right there, by white people about other white people. And moments when a white person would say something to them and they were just like, whoa, why do you think, I'm the person to be talking to here? So it was, and over time, you figure out what stays, what goes. I wanted to create a surface that was transparent, so that even as it communicated the moment, the story, it also allowed the reader not to get caught in extra details or, so it was a very conscious thing to take the most simple diction I could find. The use of the you, the second person, was sort of a joke. I wanted to use the second person because I was talking about the second person, the other person, the othering of the other. But it was also interesting to me that if you use the second person, the reader has to orient themselves as to who is who. So they would have to say, I think that person is black. I think that person is white. I don't think that's me. I would never do that. And so that, the use of the second person, once I sort of figured that out, became the sort of controlling strategy for the book. I don't know about impact, but I wanted to, as I was saying to Anita before, I wanted the moments to accumulate in the body as you were reading, so that it would replicate the experience of the black or brown body moving through time. So that when somebody reacts, like in the essay around Serena Williams, that the reaction seems larger than the moment. But in fact, it's the accumulative reverb that often people are reacting to. I think one of the things that Berlant is putting forward, if you think about Shoshana Feldman or Dory Loeb or Claude Lanzmann's show or something like that, the idea is that you have this huge trauma and it creates a break and you just suppress it. Your memory just is like, whoa, can't deal with that. And so you move on sort of over the chasm of the break, of the impasse. And I think what Berlant is saying is that it's not useful to think of trauma that way. That might be more effective to understand the feeling of it as this sort of constant repetition in its ordinariness, as a kind of ordinary day-to-day negotiation. So that's, and poetry with its repetition, with, as you say, metaphor, where things are coming back and creating their own form through that form, seems a natural marriage, I think. I mean, which is sort of different from how you were, so obviously you can use the same thing to support either sides of this. But I think, for me, that's why even when one is using the sentence and working in what seems to be prose, in like the essay form, for instance, with Serena, there is the use of repetition that allows the sort of reverb of the ordinary day-to-day trauma to come back in again and again and again. I think that when you have a space that includes everybody, and ideally that's the ideal, right? That everybody should be here. So you should be able to look around and see everyone. I think if we remain accountable to those differences and to those infractions, then it would make those moments come forward. I mean, I think that part of our problem, and I include myself, is that when things happen, we think it's impolite to refer to them. And rather than seeing discourse and discussion as generative, we feel that anything that's uncomfortable should be put away. And, race is uncomfortable. Racism is uncomfortable. But people negotiating other people means that it happens. And when you're in a space like this that is predominantly white, you know what's happening. You know what's happening. So I really think that if we just stayed accountable, and if you called out a moment, then that moment would actually, somebody would say, yeah, that's like when that thing happened before. But it means that everybody needs to call it out, not just the person to whom it happens. So, so in a sense, in the day-to-day, if you call it out in the day-to-day, the historical past will come forward. I think, for me, taking care of myself means if you say something to me that makes me feel bad, I'm going to tell you. But it's not my job to educate you. It's just my job to say, look, don't say that again to me. it makes me feel bad. The other person, if they ask me the right question, I might tell them more. If they get defensive, I don't need to take that on. Thank you so much.